Hi, and welcome to Ask Me Anything Office Hours. My name is Dan Merrick. I'm Director of Plant Based Culinary, and we are here to answer your culinary based questions today. This is an event where we basically ask any of our students to come in and type in a question in the little box on the right hand side of this video, and we try to answer it as best as possible to be able to walk you through different things, give you different techniques and tips. After you hit the add button, it will be moderated by our staff, and then it'll show up on the right hand side in the queue. Um, if you want to, you can also hit the heart button. It'll bring that question up a little bit higher as well in that queue. So I'll answer it quicker than some of the other ones as well. But we will get through all the questions today as well. So we're going to dig right in to start off. We have a question from Annette here. And Annette is saying, I've recently started a more whole food cooking and am used to so many or am using so many more herbs and spices. Is there a book you would recommend that I could purchase? I'm interested in their benefits. Yeah, so that's one of the great things about whole food cooking is you're going to start using a lot more fresh herbs, um, because you just get a big flavor out of those too. The spices are great as well. If you buy them whole, you can grind them up as well. But one of the books that I would definitely recommend for learning more about herbs and just kind of vegetables in general is The Chef's Garden by Farmer Lee Jones. So this is a wonderful book. We have a link here for you to be able to find it. So you can just find it on Amazon as well. Farmer Lee Jones is a great farmer that specifically grows vegetables for chefs as well. So he's gone through a lot of different varieties of different things and gives you tips on how to use them, but also how to grow them, different uses out of the entire vegetable as well. So a great example is like the carrot, and then how to use the carrot, the greens from the carrot as well. To be able to use the skins for different things as well. But that's a great resource that I probably recommend on learning a little bit more about herbs and spices too. So that's probably my best bet for you to be able to get out and going. There are, of course, a plethora of different, herbs and spices books out there. And I have had a couple in my library for over 40 years that are okay when I look back at them today. But when I went through the library and saw your question, I think the Chef's Garden is probably the best one that I would currently point to. So I hope that helps, Annette. JJ, I'm concerned about getting too much sugar and too many carbs on a whole food plant based diet. Somebody told me they eat approximately 200 grams of carbs per meal. Yikes. And certain veggies like carrots contain sugar. Concerned. So, just to address the sugar on carrots, I wouldn't worry too much about that because you're eating the vegetable whole in its whole state. You're not going to get tons and tons of sugar out there. You get a lot of sugar if you're eating processed sugar. That's something I would worry about a lot more. But on a whole food plant-based diet, if a vegetable or a fruit has a sugar in it, I wouldn't really worry too much about that. In fact, there's a certain diet out there called fruitarians where people just eat nothing but fruit. Hard for a chef sometimes, especially when you're catering. But so I wouldn't worry so much about the sugar if you're eating the whole foods and not adding processed sugars to them. Now, on the carbs, it's kind of a personal preference. I think everybody's a little bit different on that. And you do need carbohydrates to survive, so you don't want to cut them out completely. Some people do well with low carb diets. To be able to just have a minimal amount of carbohydrates. But if go towards a specific carbohydrate, so say like picking a sweet potato instead of a white potato, might be a little more beneficial into what you're talking about. Those sweet potatoes will actually help stave off different things. They have different vitamins in them than the regular potatoes as well too. And it is true that a lot of people, when they switch from a meat focused diet to a vegan or vegetarian diet, a lot of people's staples go right to a very carbohydrate heavy diet. As an example, like somebody who's eating meat might go to pasta and they'd have pasta a lot, or pizza, or things like that you wouldn't eat on a regular basis on a normal diet. You might have it like once a week or something like that, but you wouldn't have it like every day, right? So I think that that's probably the area you might want to kind of focus at a little bit, is look at your carbohydrate intake and what kind of carbohydrate you're doing on a daily basis. And you can plan your meals around that. Now, Again, different people have different ways that they process those carbohydrates. So myself, I'm not really big on eating bread with every meal, but my wife is, she loves her carbohydrates and she kind of gets angry if she doesn't have them. So I make sure to have those kinds of things for her, but I might not partake in something like that as much. But that's just a great kind of an example of how different people, even living in the same house, have different dietary plans for themselves and what makes their bodies feel best as well. So if you're eating a whole food plant-based diet, don't worry about the sugar intake that's coming from a specific vegetable or a fruit. If you're doing carbohydrates, if you're worried about eating too many carbohydrates, just pick the good carbohydrates over the less healthier ones. All right, so Tony, I came across a video of someone making a vegan turkey loaf, but they used vital wheat gluten. Is there a way to make a vegan turkey loaf without gluten that will still give the firmness? So, making a vegan turkey out of wheat gluten is you're talking about seitan basically, and the reason that people started doing that was it gave a texture really of the turkey, and it's a sliceable kind of thing that you can slice off because you're it's almost like a bread kind of, if you think about it, but it's thicker and it's juicy and has that kind of same kind of thing that you can cut through in that same way. I've actually never really been a fan of the wheat gluten turkeys. Get big around the holidays. A lot of people will sell them. But if you're looking for a substitution that's not gluten, you might want to look to something like tofu. And if you're looking to get that same kind of texture, you might want to try freezing tofu because you'll get that actual the texture that instead of being like a really kind of light, soft texture of tofu, when you freeze tofu, will become a little bit more stringy and have a little bit more fibrous, kind of texture to it. Now, of course, you would have to marinate that tofu beforehand to be able to make sure that you would get that same kind of flavor that you're looking for, either using like a brine of some sort or just a marinade to be able to get that going. But if you're looking to do a turkey, there are a lot of different ways to do it, but I typically just go outside of a turkey instead of trying to recreate a meat protein for like a holiday meal. I'll typically go with something a little more like non-traditional. So making things like lasagnas or bakes or all kinds of different things that you can be able to make off those. But if you're looking to be able to do a vegan turkey specifically without using wheat gluten, I would probably suggest going towards a tofu and then also doing a frozen version of it. Now, if you're wanting to do a loaf, that's a whole different thing where it says a vegan turkey loaf. So if you're doing loaf, um, like in a bread pan kind of a style, a lentil loaf is actually a wonderful complement to be able to make that happen. It goes great with gravy, so you can use it for holidays as well too. Looking into a lot of those, we have a lentil and garbanzo bean loaf that our kids actually even love, which is great. It has a nice, firmness to it, but it's not recreating a meat-like texture. It's kind of like a meatloaf-ish kind of a thing, but it's definitely not like a sliceable kind of texture like you would get with the vegan turkey. All right, out of gluten, that is. Hope that helps, Tony. All right, Pauline, I'm hosting a holiday dinner. I'm trying to figure out which dishes to prepare in advance. I'm considering a salad with a spiced and baked squash, a green bean dish, gratin potatoes, and a vegan lasagna. Those are great things. And, I'm a huge proponent on holiday dinners. It's one of those times when you get like family together and friends together, and you don't want to spend all your time in the kitchen, right? So preparing in advance is a great idea. So as much as you can do beforehand, either prepping vegetables or getting an entire dish ready so you can just put it in the oven and leave it for an hour or so and then bring it out when it's time to serve is a great idea. I love your ideas with the potatoes and lasagna, the green bean dishes. All of those can pretty much be prepared in advance. The salad, you just want to make sure not to put any dressing or anything on it. Don't put any of the hot baked squash or anything on it until the very end. So just make sure you got all those things kind of lined up so you can do as much ahead of time and then kind of serve after everything's been sitting for a little bit. The gratin potatoes can all be prepared in advance. The green bean dish might be a little tough because you want to typically blanch those and put them in an ice bath, but you can do that ahead of time and have them ready just to kind of quickly heat up if you're doing some sort of green bean dish. I've messed around with very traditional, recipes for green beans that work great. Or I've even, done the green bean casserole, and I've even done them with like a dip and things like that. But there are a host of different recipes that you can do to be able to prepare in advance a little bit. That includes desserts too. We're usually a pretty easy one to be able to prepare in advance. But if you do have to do something, while you're cooking over it, make sure it's something simple enough that you're not, running around the kitchen like crazy while you have guests there. Tony, I like vegan butter, but is there something else I can use to replace butter when making waffles, pancakes, and etc.? That's completely up to you, Tony. So it really depends on what your personal preference is and what you like waffles and pancakes with. Maple syrup is kind of the go-to for my kids. Sometimes I'll actually use like a good like a preserve or something like that as well. After harvesting, especially just coming into the fall and winter seasons, we end up having a lot of different kinds of preserves. So that's a great thing to be able to do instead. Still add some of the moisture to the waffles and pancakes as well. And of course, the maple syrup is kind of always the go-to. One thing we always do is heat up the maple syrup actually before putting it on as well. So just a little tip for you there. Shar, wonderful to see you. Great. Thinking about Thanksgiving and looking at sweet potatoes, I find that the satsumao and the bonito are, I can pronounce those horribly wrong, to be dry and casseroles and such. What would be your go-to from this sweet potato family? Happy Thanksgiving Day. Great to see you, Shar, as usual. So yeah, those varieties can be a little bit drier when you're using them that way. I actually love to use a burgundy sweet potato when I'm doing kind of those bakes like that because they're really moist. They have a good color to them. Um, and they get the name burgundy because of the kind of the red outside on them as well. So I usually try to keep the skins on them. I just like the nutrients that's added into them as well too. But quite honestly, just for everyday kind of sweet potatoes, we've been doing the purple, like the Okinawan sweet potatoes a lot more. One of the it's great things about purple sweet potatoes is they definitely look different. My kids actually love them. For some reason, they will eat a purple potato, but they won't eat a orange sweet potato, which is pretty wild. But hey, maybe it's just a color thing for kids, but it works for them. But sweet potatoes are a wonderful benefit. They stave off a lot of different diseases. Eating them regularly, at least for the Okinawa people, actually helps with their longevity as well, according to our Blue Zones course as well. So that's actually one of them that I've been using quite often. And I'll put it in soups, miso soup. My daughter loves miso soup just with tofu and the purple sweet potatoes, and it turns the soup kind of a purplish tint too, which is pretty fun to be able to have those as well. So I'm usually using those purple sweet potatoes on kind of a more daily basis, but for putting it into a bake or to a hash, I might do something along the burgundy line for sweet potatoes as well. Speaking of that book by Farmer Lee Jones, there's a great chapter specifically on sweet potatoes too, and just different kinds of varieties to be able to know in it as well. I kind of marked it out there as well. So if you're picking up the book, definitely check out that section. Really goes into some of the great uses for them and even using the leaves on sweet potatoes too, which is wonderful. But hope you have a great Thanksgiving Day too, Shar. All right. So, Denise, what are you making on Thanksgiving? There's so many great choices, and I'm gluten free. Thank you and happy Thanksgiving. So, I did a live event a couple years ago. I can see Patrick put the link into it. One of my traditional things that I do for my Thanksgiving is a mushroom Wellington. And that is kind of my go-to for your Thanksgiving dish because one, I can make it ahead, I can freeze it, I can travel with it if I need to as well, which I have. And there's a link to it right there. If you're gluten-free, you just have to find a gluten-free puff pastry. You can also make your own as well too, which is great. If you Google gluten-free puff pastry, you'll get links right away to be able to show you different varieties that you can buy or make on those as well. So That's usually kind of my main that I do for the vegan vegetarians in the house because holidays, it's with family that do eat meat as well. So we usually have that. And it's great because the meat eaters will actually go right towards that Wellington as well, too. And that's basically a mushroom Wellington is I'll do it with portobello mushrooms. I'll do usually about three of them and then fill it with all kinds of other mushrooms from chanterelles to shiitakes. And then do a spinach base in there as well. Wrap the entire thing and bake it off. And it's a wonderful, I'll do like a aquafaba egg wash right over the top of it. So it gets a nice good color on that. So that's one of kind of my staples for Thanksgiving. For others, mashed potatoes are always a big staple. And I always do a mushroom gravy from scratch, which is great because I'm using the mushroom gravy for the Wellington as well too. It's a traditional thing. Just a lot of my family members like to do the green bean casserole, so I'll make a green bean casserole, and I usually make it from scratch. So I'll do like an almond milk kind of mushroom soup that you typically would use as those weird cans, and then do the fried onions is probably the worst thing that I put on the top of it, and those are usually a store bought fried mushroom or the crispy onions is what I'm thinking of. So I have done a spin on that before too, where I've actually had the green beans and left them whole, parboiled them, and get them cold again, and then did a wrap around where I basically kind of you dip it basically in the soup, kind of a mix, and then put the onions around the outside, and then serve them as kind of a stick on a. And those were a hit, but man, it was a lot of labor, especially the day of. It was kind of a lot. So, but I mean, really, I think it's looking at the traditional foods that you and your family and friends like and recreating them in a whole food plant-based way that's healthy for everybody to be able to make sure that you're all making good choices during the holiday season. So those are kind of my top hits there. Sometimes we'll do like a mushroom soup. I guess mushrooms are a big theme for me for the holidays. I had not realized that, but they kind of are on a daily basis anyways. But my mom loves to do a corn souffle as well. In Austin, Texas, there's a place called Fonda San Miguel that did an amazing corn souffle, and they have a cookbook as well. It was not a vegan recipe, but we figured out a vegan way to be able to make that work. She'll also make a vegan version of brioche bread as well too, which is pretty fantastic. I don't know that recipe though; it's kind of one of her trade secrets. So, but yeah, those are some of the things that we make for our Thanksgiving meal. And check out the link on the Wellington. That link has a couple of the other recipes that I do for holidays as well. All right, Tony C. Is TVP good to use? I sometimes use it when I make tacos. Yeah, TVP is completely a personal preference on people. It's not really a whole food plant-based ingredient because basically what it is, it's typically like a soy product where the fat's been taken out of it. And it's very processed to be able to get it to it. It's a good meat replacer. It's wonderful for that ground beef kind of like texture. I don't use it often, but I will use it sometimes for doing taco stuff, but I'll also use it in chili sometime as well. So if you're doing like a bean chili and want a little bit more kind of that meatier texture, it's a good thing to kind of throw into it as well and help absorb some of those other flavors. So is it good to use? It depends. If you're looking for the kind of texture quality of it, yeah, that's great. If you're looking for the health benefits of it, you're not going to get a whole lot of health benefits out of TVP, but it's kind of helping to make that bridge over. All right, so Anna Marie, I've been experimenting with wines to deglaze in my no oil cooking. What are your suggestions for using red and white wines, and what dishes would work with what wines? So I deglaze often with wines. Typically when I'm doing especially in holiday times, I'll do deglaze mushrooms and onions with white wine. And I think it's my mom told me this many years ago as a cook is you should be cooking with the same wine you'd be drinking, right? So you'll get the flavor, as you're drinking the wine later on. But if you're deglazing, you're getting rid of the alcohol that's actually into it, but it's also bringing that flavor up to another level. So Typically, I'm going to deglaze with a white wine. Now, I might have um, I might cook like I'll do like a bourguignon with a red wine. I don't do a beef bourguignon. I'll either do a seitan bourguignon or I'll do a portobello bourguignon with red. So I deglaze a little bit in that dish with it, but typically the whole thing is just cooking in the wine and stock mixture. So that's typically the only time I'm going to be deglazing with a red wine. More often than not, it's going to be a white wine. And that is just going to bring, again, that white wine will bring out a whole other element of flavor that you wouldn't get if you're deglazing with water or something else. You can also deglaze with like beer and stuff. That's just not something I typically do. I'm not a big fan of the taste of beer. So, I don't drink beer often or anything like that. So it's not something I typically use to be deglazing with and that flavor profile. But I hope that helps, Anna Marie. Tony, are there any vegan ham recipes that doesn't call for gluten? I have a recipe and it's so good, but it has gluten. I'm trying to avoid gluten, but it's a challenge. So, oh, and you're the one who asked about the turkey as well. So, what I would suggest is trying to not replicate the meat dish as much in that same way, because a lot of times those are heavily processed ingredients or gluten. So ham is always kind of a difficult one to do, especially if you're looking like ham, like sliceable ham. That would typically be a gluten dish as well. Otherwise, you could do it in the tofu thing, like I said before. But if you're like, often I will recreate a bacon-esque kind of flavor by doing like by smoking it basically. You can either use a liquid smoke, you can use the briquettes on a grill, which I often do. I'll make a smoked salsa. I've been doing a lot lately, which you basically take wood chips, like hickory wood chips, and soak them for about an hour, and then put them in a container on the grill, and then you put your other ingredients in the grill, and the smoke flavor basically kind of goes through everything. And you can do that with tempeh. You can do it with all kinds of different things as far as recreating baconish kind of flavors. I'll also use smoked salt sometimes in that same way. If I don't want to whole grill everything, but I'll do shiitake bacon. I'll do, the tempeh bacon. You could do tofu bacon, all those kinds of styles. As far as the ham recipe goes, though, that's a little different. And I've never personally tried to recreate like a sliced ham using a vegan recipe at all. So it's not quite my expertise in that. But what I would also suggest is to be able to kind of steer off of some of the replacers for the actual meat and instead try to look for things that would incorporate other textures and flavors into things. I hope that helps, Tony. All right, Anna Marie, do you do you have your famous chili recipe available? We do not have it on Ruby, and in fact, my chili recipe changes kind of every time I make it, depending on what I have on hand and kind of what the season is a little bit. It's always going to start with a mirepoix, so I'm going to have like a carrot uh, and a yellow onion. I'll sometimes put celery into it. My wife's got kind of an aversion to celery, so if it goes in early enough, it's okay. It doesn't permeate the whole dish. So a lot of times I don't put it into it. Um, I'll start with that and just I'll start with a little bit of oil or water, and then add in the the some of the chili powder there and a little bit of cumin to start out with that as well, and then I'll start kind of building on from there. So I'll put in my beans and I'll put in my I'll put in chilies. Usually I put my chilies in before my beans, and then I'll put in tomatoes as well, and I'll do fresh tomatoes, and I'll do canned tomatoes. Usually just a diced tomato, organic, works great. Just make sure you have a BPA line free lined can. And then just dump the whole mixture of diced tomatoes into it. I usually do a mixture of black beans and pinto beans, but sometimes I'll do like a white bean chili. And then sometimes I'll even put TVP in, like I was saying before, the textured vegetable protein. And that kind of, depends on the mood at the moment. I'm always going to use a fresh stock to be able to get it up and going. And the whole thing is I'm always going to be adding spices for every layer of something I put in. So if I cook all my mirepoix off, I'm going to incorporate spices then. And then I add my next ingredient, like the chilies, and I will add in more spice then. And then I will add in the beans and tomatoes. I'll re-flavor it again, and you'll see the depth of flavor starts to build and build basically as you're going. My biggest secret is I always make the chili the night before, right? So don't eat the chili the night you make it. Let it sit and kind of marinate into itself for at least a day. So that's probably, my kind of go-to chili. And of course, then I'll top it off with things like cilantro, or my kids have been liking tortilla chips over the top of it lately, or just eating it with a tortilla chip, which, hey, as long as you're eating it, that's great. You can do uh, like a vegan sour cream on the top of it too. You can do that just like a silken tofu and lemon if you'd like to, just to be able to kind of add another depth of flavor to it as well. So yeah, we don't have it on the site, but that's, if you replay this live event once it comes out recorded, you'll probably get the recipe pretty straight there too. All right, Abigail, I can't find the vegan or the Wellington link. Please help. I see Patrick just linked it again. It's right next to my name on the bottom there, Dan's Mushroom Wellington. And that should get you up and going there. All right. So that looks like it's the end of our event. Thank you guys for joining us today. And if you have questions, you can always email us or join us for our next Ask Me Anything hours. Have a great day and eat well.